So now we start off with information, crime, and corruption with theme 1. So crime is concerned with illegal activities, and these are frequently caused by people from outside the organization. Illegal activities are defined by laws and are set externally. For example, breaches of data protection, computer misuse, copyright, design and patent breaches, etc. So ICT crimes or cyber crimes is the act of performing a criminal activity using a computer or the internet or cyberspace. And crimes committed using ICT and the internet are more convenient, more inexpensive or cheap, and therefore more profitable with a lower risk profile than crimes committed using more traditional means. So the internet raises issues surrounding censorship, what should people be allowed to see and do, security, how can the security threats posed by the internet be minimized, and ethics, how can the ethical use of the internet be ensured. The international nature of the internet poses several problems. What's legal in one country may be illegal in another. Offensive material may vary between cultures. But now let's take a look at the categories of cyber crimes. So the first is cyber crimes against persons. So this is the violation of privacy of online citizens. It could be harassment via email too. For example, cyber harassment, sexual, racial, religious, email scams, etc. So within cyber crimes against persons, we have cyber stalking, hacking, cracking, phishing, and credit card fraud. So cyber stalking is the use of electronic communications to harass or frighten someone, for example, sending threatening emails. And then hacking is the unauthorized control or access or destroying data. Cracking is breaking into computer systems and tampering with precious confidential data. And then phishing is the type of fraud when an ATM is compromised by a skimming device. A skimming device is a card reader which can be disguised to look like part of the machine. The card reader saves the user's card number and PIN code, which is then replicated into a counterfeit copy for theft. And then we have credit card fraud. So this is the use of a credit card account through the theft of the account holder's card number, card details, and personal information. And this is done through a wide variety of methods in order to perform unauthorized transactions from the compromised account. And then the next category of cybercrime is cybercrimes against property. This includes computer vandalism and transmission of harmful viruses or programs. So here we have intellectual property crimes, cyber squatting, and cyber vandalism. So intellectual property crimes include software piracy, IP rights, trademark patents, and theft of computer source code, etc. And then we have cyber squatting, so two people claiming the same domain name. And then we have cyber vandalism, deliberately damaging or destroying data or information stored in someone's computer. And then the last category of cybercrime is cybercrimes against governments or society. So this is when an individual cracks into a government or military website, and it includes cyber terrorism. So within this category we have cyber trafficking, online gambling, and financial crimes. Cyber trafficking involves trafficking human beings, drugs, arms, etc. Online gambling involves online fraud and cheating. And then financial crimes involve using credit cards by obtaining passwords illegally. But now let's take a look at the ripple effects of cybercrime. When a company starts to make less profit, they'll increase their prices. And if they can't increase the price of their goods and services, they'll cut back on their expenses, like jobs. People will lose their jobs and families with one income will suffer. The education of their children and their future will be uncertain, and it could lead to corruption or crime. And this will lead to lower foreign investments and a drop in tourists, which is a high-earning industry, and the standard of living for many will suffer. Now let's take a look at information security factors that have caused South Africa to be vulnerable to cybercrime. Well, first is negligence. Employees should be educated on the basics of information security so that they can be aware of the little things that can aid the cyber criminals. Second is confidential information. Confidential information is stored online and on databases for most organizations and institutions, and this is likely to compromise the security of the information. And then we have email attachments. Sending malware through email attachments, people open these attachments and allow the malware to be stored on the machine to spy and steal. But then how can ICTs be used to combat crime? Well, use within the police forces will be to both solve crime and to try prevent it from happening again. The use of predictive analytics and GPS maps show crime hotspots in the state. And GPS technologies can be used in the following ways. There can be emergency response, patrol management, individual and vehicle tracking, and gunshot detection. And GPS can be used to assign police patrols to hotspot areas in a bid to increase response times when a crime occurs. So, but what is cybersecurity software? Well, this is the use of software to prevent or block cyber attacks. so to prevent phishing attacks, malware, etc. But now let's take a look at the types of tools that can be used. So first we have CCTV technology. So CCTV cameras can be used for surveillance of target premises and locations where police have intelligence that crime is likely to occur. You can also use AI to monitor camera footage. And then we also have tracking technology. So GPS devices can be used by law enforcement agents to track suspects and use their locations as potential evidence. And drones can also help with this. And then we also have social media. So social media is a great way to distribute information, and news of crime can quickly spread across these networks. By sharing a surveillance camera image or personal video on social media, law enforcement agents may be able to get tips as to the identity of the criminal. And then we have mobile phones. So systems can be accessed through smartphones and other mobile devices, which allows homeowners to get instant alerts about potential property crimes or cyber crimes. And then the suggested way of crime prevention using ICT tools is CCTV, a closed-circuit television, a situational crime prevention system with some crime prevention capacity. It can trigger a perceptual mechanism with a potential offender, and that if they commit a crime, they'll be caught. All other nations all over the world have embraced the use of CCTV as a surveillance tool to monitor events, people, and government installations. For example, Boston's marathon bomb attack. But then how do we combat corruption in South Africa? Well, a technocratic approach to corruption isn't enough, so using advanced tech isn't enough. It should be complemented by educational and informational approaches, new laws, new human rights, and transparency organizations. There may also need to be changes to anti-corruption conventions and protocols combined with awareness and empowerment programs. Now we move on to the political economy of information with theme 2. So in the emerging knowledge-based or information economy, knowledge professionals or information workers are supposed to form the biggest workforce group propelling market economies, thereby impacting economics, culture, societies, and politics. And this is the information society theory. But what are the four corners of the information society? Well, first is ICT infrastructure, then physical infrastructure, then content, and then human capability. And we should consider the issues of information poverty and the digital divide. But now let's take a look at informational dilemmas. So this is how justice will be limited by informational constraints. For example, unequal access to information, credit companies and client information can discriminate unfairly, charging structure, unauthorized copies of academic texts. Then we also look at IP and open source. But now let's take a look at the ethics and access to information. So first is politics, so dictatorship maybe, censorship, creating a climate of fear and power structures, and then unequal access to information based on gender, financial status, ethnicity, religion, economic activity, political persuasion, education, and language. And an example of this is Malawi. But now let's take a look at ethical theories. So we have two traditional ethical theories. The first is descriptive ethical theories. So they describe the morally correct way of acting or how we should act. And then we have the normative ethical theories. They describe how ethics decisions are actually made in business and how we actually act. And then in terms of normative ethical theories, we have ethical absolutism, ethical relativism, and ethical pluralism. Ethical absolutism says there are eternal, universally applicable moral principles. Ethical relativism claims morality is context-dependent and subjective. Then ethical pluralism is the middle ground between two of these. And then in terms of Western modernist ethical theories, we have deontological or non-consequentialist ethics, and they focus on the motivation and the action of the decision maker. Then we have teleological or consequentialist ethics, and they focus on the outcome of the actions. So in terms of duty ethics, rights theory, and social contract ethics, it's focused on motivation or grounds for action. And then character ethics is focused on the actor or agent. And then act or rule utilitarianism is focused on the consequences of an action. But now let's take a look at information as a commodity. This is a little bit problematic though, because information can't be regarded merely as an input or factor of production. It's integral to, permeates, and transforms other inputs such as capital and labor and the entire production process. It's not an ordinary economic output either. Unlike other commodities, information is claimed to be immaterial or intangible as it's not consumed in use. Its material form as print, film, videotape, etc. can be exchanged, but its immaterial essence, meaning, or message can't. So essentially, its physical features like the number of pages or hours of TV, etc., can be measured, but the meaning or message can't. The basic contradiction in the production of information is the free sharing of ideas versus the selling of information for profit. So what is commodification? Well, commodification is the process of transforming objects and services into commodities. So it's the transformation of use values into exchange values. But we should know it's nearly impossible to commodify information. It's infinitely reproducible, so non-costly. It can be used without reducing the availability to others, so non-rivalrous. It's immaterial, non-reducible. It can't be destroyed by use, can be reconsumed or non-consumable. And this causes information to be viewed as a public good rather than a commodity. But then what is infonomics? Well, this is the discipline of measuring the value of information assets. So monetizing, managing, and measuring information for competitive advantage. So first you centralize the data, so create, collect, and validate the data. And then you internalize the data, so daily processing, correlate with other data, enhance information's context, use in simple reporting and trends, etc. And then third is sharing the data, share internally, exchange with partners, use for strategic planning, use for risk management, use for audits and compliance, etc. And then fourth is enhancing the data, so predictive insights, adding value through correlation, add value through enhancement, add value through the use of machine learning or AI, etc. But then what is the information circuit? Well, this is the dynamic interaction between the various elements that govern the flow of information. So the component elements are representation, production, products and services, consumption, and regulation. And all five of these things are connected. But now let's talk a bit about the political economy and information. So the political economy is the study of social relations, particularly power relations that mutually constitute the production, distribution, and consumption of resources, including information resources. And you should know macroeconomics deals with the political economy, aggregate production and consumption, economic growth, employment, inflation, and it also considers policy development on a national scale. And then we have microeconomics, which deals with specific markers, market structure, conduct and behavior, and the activity of producers and consumers. Considers policy development on an institutional scale. But now let's take a look at the political economy approach to information. Well, there are four central characteristics to the political economy of information. First is social change in history, then social totality, then moral philosophy, and then social praxis. Well, first we have voters and pressure groups, and they impact political decisions and lobbying and persuasion. They affect political parties, and political parties affect the government, and then the government affects parliament. And then parliament sets economic policy, objectives, and programs. This leads to civil service, and civil service leads to economic policy instruments, and this feeds into the economy. And then from the economy, there's economic constraints, and this affects voters, pressure groups, and civil service. And then the cycle continues. But then what are the geographies of information? Well, this is the spatial distribution and patterns of information creation, dissemination, access, and usage. So it's the impact of geographical location on the availability and flow of information. And by studying information geographies, one can access patterns of mutability, mobility, and underlying power relations relative to historical arrangements in the production and use of information. The geographical distribution of information is a key means of control and power formation. But then what is the hegemonic or cultural regime of representation? Well, this is the symbolic and political power to represent the other in ways which control the mode in which the other's image and identity is perceived and apprehended. So hegemonic representations affect representations, participation, accessibility, and enablement, and they all impact on social, economic, and political powers. But let's talk a bit about the democratic power of the internet. So representations, participation, accessibility, and enablement means people have the opportunity to access and participate in the construction of knowledge and culture despite where one is geographically located. And now we move on to theme 3, information as an economic and public good. So a free good is a good with no opportunity cost, for example water or air. And then an economic good is a good with some benefit to society and an opportunity cost, and includes both private and public goods. And then a private good is one where there's rivalry and excludability, for example Coke. And then with a public good there's non-rivalry and it's non-excludable, for example street lights and the justice system. Information has certain market and non-market characteristics, and it can be distinguished from other economic goods. Since competitive markets drive prices toward marginal cost, the prices of information goods tend to zero. But now let's talk a bit about the economic value of information. Well, we can look at foundational measures and financial measures. In terms of foundational measures, you could have the intrinsic value of information, the business value of information, and the performance value, and these are all focused on improving information management discipline. And then in terms of financial measures, you could look at the cost value of information, the market value of information, and the economic value of information. And these are all focused on improving information's economic benefits. And you should know an information good is anything that can be potentially digitized. Then we have information as an experience good. An information good must be used or consumed in order to demonstrate the good and to determine the associated value, which isn't fixed or constant. Once the information is viewed, the value for purchase disappears. Solutions to this is a preview sample, reviews, or reputation. And now we talk about returns to scale. Information is costly to produce but cheap to reproduce. It also has a high fixed cost but low variable and marginal cost. So solutions to this could be price discrimination for different groups of customers, quality discrimination through delay to market segment, etc. Then we look at information as a public good. Information goods are non-rivalrous and sometimes non-excludable. So one person's consumption doesn't diminish another person's ability to consume the same information good. And now let's talk about information overload. Information production is exponential whilst information consumption is linear at best. Some solutions to this is collaborative recommender systems, so influencers, and institutional filtering. And now let's talk a bit about the market characteristics of information. Well, first there's intrinsic co-production. So information has instrumental value. It assists in attaining desired outcomes. Information expands as it's used to produce even more information. So information accelerates the process. And then we have time-constrained consumption. Information affects choices, but the receiver must take time to assimilate the information, namely in reception, memorization, and thinking, etc. More consumer time is occupied by information than by other goods per rand of expenditure. For example, it may take 10 minutes to consume a 95 rand steak, but take 2 hours to watch a 95 rand movie. So information also has high investment to reproduction costs. The initial costs for creating information are high relative to the cost of reproduction. Another market characteristic of information is that the relevance of information varies across consumers. For example, information goods such as the alphabet and vocabulary need only to be consumed once. This leads to high variability across consumers of information. But now let's take another look at the infonomics model. So there's 3 parts: measuring, managing, and monetizing information. So when measuring information, you take a look at the quality, value, and economics, gauging and improving information's economic characteristics. And then with managing information, you look at barriers, frameworks, the organization, or roles. So you apply traditional asset management principles and practices to information. And then for monetizing information, you look at the justification, the inspiration, and the execution. So you generate measurable economic benefits from or attributable to available information assets. But now let's take a look at product bundling with information. So microeconomics says the case for bundling products and services depends on the distribution of reservation prices across consumers. So the reservation price is what you're willing to pay when considering the use and exchange values. And then a pure bundling strategy is where goods X and Y can only be purchased together at a single price. But now let's take a look at the 5 waves of economic growth and globalization. So we have the age of discovery in the 15th to 18th century, and Spain, Portugal, the UK, and the Netherlands were the leading nations at this time. And this was brought about mainly by the scientific revolution. Then we move on to globalization 1.0. So this is the 19th century to 1914. The leading nation being the UK. This is mainly because of the first industrial revolution. Then we move on to globalization 2.0, and this is from 1945 to 1989. The leading nations being the US and China at this time. Then we move on to globalization 3.0 from 1989 to 2008. The leading countries being the US here. And then we move on to globalization 4.0, brought about by the fourth industrial revolution. The leading countries being the US and China here. This one's focused on digital goods and services. And as the globalization eras continue, exports as a percentage of world GDP increases. But now let's talk about the impact of ICTs. Well, it's an enabler. It can be applied in a wide range of different circumstances and can itself contribute to further technological change. The capacity of technology has been increasing at an exponential rate, and the cost of technology has been falling rapidly. But now let's take a look at the classification of information industries. Well, first we have the information content industry, then the information delivery industry, then the information processing industry. These are the 3 emerging information industries. But then what are the functions of the information industry? Well, it's production, processing, distribution, and building of infrastructure. But now let's talk about the public sector in relation to the information industry. Well, they can assist with general efficiency, commercial organization like e-filing, admin, clerical and post office, democracy and political participation like teledemocracy, health services like Discovery app, national database, and education. But now let's talk about information and citizenship. Well, this takes a look at the ways in which we exercise our rights and responsibilities in our daily lives. So we look at consumer information like budget and contents, access to information like freedom of speech, access and accessibility like cost, advice, specialist locality, and then policy and frameworks like the POPI Act. But then what is informational politics? Well, this is how governmental and party politics are performed through the mediation of the press and the broadcasting media instead of classic government-citizen exchanges and deliberation. So we've got formal engagement processes like advising and advocacy, which involves providing policy briefings and petitioning. And then we have informal engagement processes like lobbying and activism. These involve company lobbying and direct action. And advising and lobbying take the inside track or the more cooperative approach. And then advocacy and activism takes the outside track or the more confrontational approach. Activists are demanders of policy changes, but instead of relying on public strategies such as lobbying legislature or seeking intervention of courts, some activists attempt to change the behavior of individual firms through private politics. So there are confrontational and cooperative activists. And the three behaviors of interest are favoritism, awareness, and objectives. Now we move on to theme 4 with the information sector and the information industry. So economics is the discipline that studies how scarce economic resources are allocated and used to maximize production for a society. The three economic sectors are the agricultural sector, the industrial sector, and the information sector. The factors of production being land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. The telecommunications sector includes telemedicine, distance learning, electronic commerce, government services, and digital libraries. Then the print sector comprises predominantly books, newspapers, and magazine publishing. But now let's talk a bit about globalization and informatization. Globalization has created new jobs for wage workers and has provided new markets to those who are self-employed in informal sectors in South Africa. Informatization and information technologies are considered to be the two main aspects which are required to help strengthen the cultural, economic, political, and social criteria of South Africa. Globalization and informatization have a different phenomenon effect on men and women, which brings about socio-economic changes that cause men to be more dominant over women in an information and knowledge society. So in bringing a gender perspective into macroeconomics, we look at access to education, employment, so glass ceilings and positional bias, lack of mobility, professional obstacles, and restricted land ownership. But then what is the male breadwinner bias? It relates to how public sector support for unpaid care work is constructed on the assumption that unpaid care is performed by women who are dependent on the male breadwinner. So women's access to social insurance, pensions, welfare benefits, and public services tends to be through husbands. But now let's try measuring women's contribution to the economy. Well, first there's subsistence production, so the production of goods for home use, which in principle could be marketed. For example, food, clothing, soft furnishings, pottery, housing, etc. In principle, it should be included in the measurement of the gross national product, GNP, but in practice it's frequently omitted. It's hard to measure or count. And then we take a look at unpaid care work, the work of looking after a household, cooking, cleaning, and providing personal care for family members, friends, and neighbors. It's excluded from the gross national product, but it's vital for keeping the social fabric in good repair and for maintaining and reproducing the labor force. Then we have voluntary community work. These are unpaid activities in all kinds of civil associations. For example, self-help groups of mothers getting together to run a children's playgroup or secure improvements in neighborhood safety, or to support work for large international charities. It's excluded in the GNP but contributes to sustaining the fabric of society and the sense of civic responsibility. And we should know ICTs are becoming crucial to the competitiveness and survival of a business. They've changed the way products or services are delivered. So we have productivity, collaboration, resourcing, and cost management. We also have attempts to map the information industries as a way of getting an idea of their growth and general economic significance. So the information industries include communication services like emails, SMS, social media, and then information services like digital libraries, archives, search engines, research companies, etc. And then information equipment like data centers, cell phones, etc. And then information products like ebooks, software, and media products. Now we start off with theme 5, freedom of access to information. So section 16, freedom of expression, says that everyone has the right to freedom of expression, which includes freedom of the press and other media, freedom to receive or impart information or ideas, freedom of artistic creativity and academic freedom, and freedom of scientific research. But this freedom doesn't extend to propaganda for war, the incitement of imminent violence, or advocacy of hatred that's based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, and that constitutes incitement or cause to harm. Other than the Constitution, there are no specific laws that address freedom of expression. The Protection of State Information Act comes close though, and it's important to differentiate between freedom of expression versus hate speech, and hate speech is different to dangerous speech. But then what is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Well, this is a milestone document in the history of human rights, and it is drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world, and it was declared by the UN General Assembly in Paris 1948 December as a common standard of achievement for all peoples of all nations. Article 18 says that you have the right to freedom of belief and religion, and Article 19 says you have the right to freedom of opinion and expression. And the Constitution is the supreme law of the country and declares anything inconsistent with it is invalid. And then the Bill of Rights serves as a touchstone for measuring the constitutionality and acceptability of laws and administrative acts of the government. And then the Bill of Rights Chapter 2 consists of an important set of human rights that aim to define the rights of people, and they provide to whom and how the rights apply and regulate when and how the rights may be limited. And so in terms of the rights, it's the cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. The state must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. And the rights in the Bill of Rights are subject to the limitations contained in Section 36 or elsewhere in the bill. But now let's take a look at the amendment to the Protection of Information Bill, POPI, signed into law in November 2013. While it included a new law that states that every publication, including those on the internet that aren't recognized by the government as newspaper, must be submitted for classification if it can possibly be construed to deal with a variety of matters that will be listed in the new legislation. But now let's take a look at the Democracy Index. So full democracies are countries with basic political freedoms and civil liberties that are underpinned by a democratic political culture. The media are independent and diverse, and there's an effective system of checks and balances with an independent judiciary. Then flawed democracies have free and fair elections, and basic civil liberties are respected despite infringements on media. Weaknesses include problems in governance, an underdeveloped political culture, and low levels of political participation. For example, Chile, SA, and Turkey. Examples of full democracies include Australia, Finland, the UK, or the US. Then we have hybrid regimes. So irregularities prevent elections from being both free and fair. There's government pressure on opposition parties and candidates, and the weaknesses in flawed democracies are more serious in hybrid regimes. Civil society is weak, and there's harassment of and pressure on journalists. This is while the judiciary isn't independent. For example, Singapore and Pakistan. And then we have authoritarian regimes or dictatorships. These have no political pluralism. If elections occur, they're not free and fair, and the media are either state-owned or controlled by groups connected to the ruling regime. Criticism of the government is repressed and censorship is pervasive, for example, China, Libya, and Myanmar. But now let's take a look at the philosophical notions of information. So we have three historical meanings. We have information as the process of being informed, so to inform or process. Information as a state of an agent, so having been informed or completion. And information as the disposition to inform, so the capacity or potential. So we take a look at modern building blocks, and we know that information is extensive and information reduces uncertainty. And the word information is currently predominantly used as an abstract mass noun used to denote any amount of data, code, or text that's stored, sent, received, or manipulated in any medium. But then what is information ethics? Well, this is a branch of applied ethics that studies what's morally good or bad, specifically in the context of handling information and the information age. Information ethics deals with issues like justice, fairness, freedom, human dignity, and what's morally right or wrong on three levels. So first, on the micro level, the day-to-day handling of information throughout the information lifecycle, for example, plagiarism. And then on the meso level, and this deals with questions arising in the sphere of public policy, discourse, and regulation of information, for example, censorship. And then on the macro level, the broad social and environmental issues attributed to the features of the information age, for example, the digital divide, e-waste, etc. And then some information ethics topics include information and ICT. So first is conditions, information poverty, literacy or access. And then crimes, cracking, identity theft, fraud, etc. Then experiences like information overload and anxiety and cyberbullying. And then rights and responsibilities like information privacy, cyber citizenship, social responsibility, accountability, etc. But now let's take a look at the three modes of understanding freedom. So first we have negative freedom. This is the absence of obstacles, barriers, or constraints. One has negative liberty to the extent that actions are available to them in this negative sense. Here, liberty is the absence of obstacles external to the agent. And then we have positive freedom. This is the possibility or fact of acting in such a way as to take control of one's life and realize one's fundamental purposes. Here, liberty is the presence of control on the part of the agent. To be free, you must be self-determined or be able to control your own identity in your own interests. And then we have the triadic relation. So here a subject or agent is free from certain constraints or preventing conditions to do or become certain things they want. Freedom is therefore a triadic relation between three things: an agent, constraints, and goals. And the goals could be actions or becomings of the agent. But then what is internet censorship? Well, this is the control or suppression of what can be accessed, published, or viewed on the internet enacted by regulators or on their own initiative. So these are restrictions on what information can be put on the internet or not. But now let's take a quick look at South Africa's new internet censorship laws. So the Films and Publications Amendment. So this gives the Films and Publications Bureau, the FPB, the power to regulate almost all online content published in South Africa. All online distributors will be required to register with and submit all content to the FPB for classification. And in the law it says that no person may expose a private sexual photograph, and any person who knowingly distributes hate speech in any medium which amounts to propaganda for war, incites imminent violence, or advocates hate speech shall be guilty of an offense. And if an internet access provider has knowledge that its services are being used for the above, it must immediately remove this content or be subject to a fine. But now let's take a look at some of the formal institutions that deal with the freedom of access to information and expression. So first we have UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They want the free flow of ideas by word and image. And the four core principles for internet actors are human rights-based, open, accessible for all, and governed by multi-stakeholder participation. So internet universality. And then we look at WSIS, so WSIS, the World Summit on the Information Society. So this was convened because there was an urgent need to harness the potential of knowledge and technology for promoting the goals of the UN Millennium Declaration. And then we have IFAP, the Information for All program. And this has 6 focus areas: information for development, information accessibility, information preservation, information literacy, information ethics, and multilingualism as cross-cutting. Then we look at the IPDC, the International Program for the Development of Communication. So they track world trends in freedom of expression, freedom of information, pluralism of the media, independence, safety of journalists, and gender as cross-cutting. And then we have IFLA, the IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. So this is an initiative which defends and promotes the basic human rights defined in Article 19 of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so the Advisory Committee on Freedom of Access to Information and Freedom of Expression, FAIFI, is at the heart of IFLA's efforts to promote the intellectual freedom and achieve the vital mission of supporting libraries in their role as gateways to knowledge and ideas. And so the objective of IFLA or FAIFI is to raise awareness of the essential correlation between the library concept and the values of freedom of expression, collect and disseminate documentation, and aim to stimulate a dialogue both within and outside the library world, and act as a focal point on the issue of freedom of expression and libraries. Then we take a look at the IAJ, the Institute for the Advancement of Journalism. So this is an established media journalism and communications training institution based in Joburg, South Africa. So they'd like to see journalism advance through credible skills, debates, insights, perspectives, and critical thinking. Then we take a look at the FXI, the Freedom of Expression Institute. So this is a not-for-profit NGO to protect and foster the right to freedom of expression. Their vision is a society where everyone enjoys freedom of expression and the right to access and disseminate information and knowledge. And their objectives is to fight for and defend freedom of expression, to oppose censorship, to fight for the right of equal access to information and knowledge, and to promote access to media and a free press. Now we move on to theme 6 with pricing and packaging of information. So microeconomics is the branch of economics that analyzes the market behavior of individual consumers and firms to understand the decision-making process of the firms and households. It's concerned with the interaction between the individual buyers and sellers, the factors that influence the choices made by buyers and sellers, and the patterns of supply and demand. But what are some of the factors influencing consumer choice? Well, we have personal factors, economic, social, psychological, and environmental factors. And so a market economy or free market economy is a type of economic system in which the trading and exchange of goods, services, and information takes place in a free market. It's an economy where government imposes few or no restrictions on buyers and sellers. And we should know many countries forbid producers from polluting, pricing below cost, and being a monopoly. But then what is a monopoly? Well, this is a market in which there is a sole supplier of a product with no close substitutes, and there's barriers to entry. New firms can't profitably enter the market, and the things that cause barriers to entry is legal restrictions, economies of scale, and control of an essential resource. But now let's take a look at the types of economies. Well, first we have free markets. These are governed by the law of supply and demand. The market itself and participants will determine the price of goods and services. So businesses can decide which goods to produce and in what quantity, and consumers or businesses can decide what they want to purchase and at what price. Now we take a look at planned economies. These are the opposite of free markets, where the government decides what to produce, in what quantity, and to be sold at what price. There's price controls on goods and services, and innovation is difficult, and inefficiency isn't necessarily punished. And then we have mixed economies. These blend market and planned economies. Government will have some role in regulating the market, but all other activity will be driven by the decisions of buyers and sellers. Since the government will always have some level of regulatory control, no country operates as a free market in the strict sense, but we generally say market economies are those in which governments intervene as little as possible, while mixed economies include elements of both capitalism and socialism. But now let's take a look at the steps for determining prices. Well, the first step is establishing pricing objectives. Do you want to increase sales volume? Do you want a prestigious image? Or increase market share? And then the second step is to study costs. Can you make a profit? Can you reduce costs without affecting quality or image? And then the third step is estimating demand. What do customers expect to pay? And prices are usually directly related to demand. The fourth step is studying competition. And then the fifth step is deciding on a pricing strategy. You could price higher than the competition because your product is superior, or you could price lower, then raise it once your product is accepted. And then the last step, step 6, is setting the price. You should monitor and evaluate its effectiveness as conditions in the market change. And now let's take a look at the 9 principles of economics. Well, the first principle is that people face trade-offs. To get one thing, we must usually give up another thing, so there's no free lunch. For example, leisure time versus work, efficiency or productivity versus equity, fair distribution. And making decisions requires trading off one goal against another. And then the second principle is that the cost of something is what you give up getting it. So decisions require comparing costs and benefits. For example, college versus work, or studying versus going on a date. The opportunity cost of an item is what you've given up to obtain that item. And then the third principle is that rational people think at the margin. People make decisions by comparing costs and benefits at the margin. The fourth principle is that people respond to incentives. Marginal changes in costs or benefits motivate people to respond. And then the fifth principle is that trade can make everyone better off. People gain from their ability to trade with one another. Competition results in gains from trade, and trade allows people to specialize in what they do best. The sixth principle is that markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. A market economy allocates resources through the decentralized decisions of many firms and households as they interact in markets for goods and services. Households decide what to buy and what to work for, and firms decide who to hire and what to produce. The seventh principle is that government can sometimes improve market outcomes. Market failures occur when the market fails to allocate resources efficiently. When the market fails and breaks down, the government can intervene to promote efficiency and equity. And then the eighth principle is that the standard of living depends on a country's production. Standard of living may be measured in different ways. You could do it by comparing personal incomes or by comparing the total market value of a nation's production. Productivity is the amount of goods and services produced from each hour of a worker's time. And then the ninth and last principle of economics is that prices rise when the government prints too much money. When the government creates large quantities of money, the value of money falls. Now we move on to theme 7 with information and communication media. So first we take a look at the ICT Development Index and the IDI values out of 10. The main objectives are to measure the level and evolution of ICT developments over time in countries and relative to other countries, to measure the progress in ICT development, so it should be global and affect changes taking place in countries at different levels of ICT development, to measure the digital divide, so differences in countries in terms of their ICT development, and to measure the development potential of ICTs or the extent to which countries can make use of ICTs to enhance growth and development based on available capabilities and skills. But now, what is the Network Readiness Index? Well, this helps to assess a country's ability to capitalize on the digital revolution and how prepared they are to benefit from the emerging fourth industrial revolution. So network readiness rests on whether a country has the necessary drivers for digital technology to unleash their potential, and whether these technologies are actually impacting the economy and society. The drivers are grouped within 4 sub-indices. So first we have the environment sub-index. This looks at the political and regulatory environment and the business and innovation environment. And then we have the readiness sub-index. So this looks at infrastructure, affordability, and skills. And then we have the usage sub-index. This looks at individual usage, business usage, and government usage. And then we have the impact sub-index. This looks at economic impacts and social impacts. So 2 distinct types of innovation are found in the Network Readiness Index. So first is digital technologies affecting innovation, so R&D and basic research, product and process innovation, and business model innovation. And then we have competition-driven innovation not involving new technologies but utilizing current ones. So this deals with increasing market size, reducing barriers to entry, and acquiring and leveraging knowledge of consumer preferences. Now let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. So the first goal is poverty. Digital platforms, whether global or local, are key to accessing services and participation in all aspects of social life, political, cultural, economic, etc. It provides the means and capabilities to assure meaningful participation and becomes an ethical imperative and contributes to overcoming poverty and ensuring the common good. And then the next goal is no hunger. So here, enhancing participation, providing access to information, and sharing of knowledge is critical to ensuring the balance between meeting current and future needs, and this is central to the ethical values of non-discrimination, respect for nature, and the promotion of the common good. And then the third goal is good health. So offering the broadest possible access to medical services, adequate safeguards to ensure informed choice, and the protection of privacy and personal data are essential. And then the fourth goal is quality education, and this has the same content as poverty, but here we have open educational resources, OERs. And then the fifth goal is gender equality. So digital platforms are a key to social participation, and all physical, technical, social, and cognitive barriers to women's participation in virtual spaces must be addressed. And this is to ensure their ability to benefit from the opportunities of the knowledge societies. So all users must be empowered to report and combat all forms of gender-based intolerance, bullying, profiling, discrimination, and other online threats. And then the sixth goal is clean water and sanitation. Ensuring universal access to safe and affordable drinking water for all by 2030 requires that we invest in adequate infrastructure, provide sanitation facilities, and encourage hygiene at every level. And this also involves protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems such as forests, mountains, wetlands, etc. And then the seventh goal is affordable and clean energy. A global economy reliant on fossil fuels and the increase of greenhouse gas emissions is creating drastic changes to our climate system. And then we take a look at good jobs and economic growth. So these factors can undermine or promote social cohesion as they mitigate against an individual's sense of equality and may impair their ability to assume their social responsibilities and increase their vulnerability to participate in illicit activities due to lack of skills and competencies. So promoting the common good provides an ethical basis for addressing this challenge. And then the ninth goal is innovation and infrastructure. So this involves ensuring participation of all persons in the digital spaces is key to fostering equality, solidarity, shared responsibility, and the common good and inclusive knowledge societies. Then the 10th goal is reduced inequalities, and this has the same content as innovation and infrastructure. And then the 11th goal is sustainable cities and communities. So this deals with the creation of conditions for equitable participation in all aspects of social life, political, cultural, and economic. And these are central to realizing peace and the values of freedom, equality, solidarity, and shared responsibility. And then the 12th goal is responsible consumption. So ensuring the balance between meeting the current and future needs is central to the ethical values of sustainability, respect for nature, shared responsibility, and the promotion of the common good. And then the 13th goal is climate action, and this has the same content as responsible consumption. And then the 14th goal is life below water, so sustainably managing and protecting marine and coastal ecosystems from pollution, as well as address the impacts of ocean acidification, and enhancing conservation and the sustainable use of ocean-based resources through international law will also help mitigate some of the challenges facing our oceans. And then the 15th goal is life on land, so to conserve and restore the use of terrestrial ecosystems such as forests, wetlands, drylands, and mountains by 2020. Halting deforestation is also vital to mitigating the impact of climate change. Urgent action must be taken to reduce the loss of natural habitats and biodiversity, which are a part of our common heritage. And then we have peace and justice. So these goals are intrinsically tied to ethical values of equality, solidarity, shared responsibility, and the promotion of the common good. The protection of fundamental freedoms is a core aspect of the ethical dimensions of the information society and central to the realization of the overarching goal of peace. Then the 17th and last development goal is partnerships for the goals. So the development of the capacities and competencies of all peoples to effectively participate on the digital platforms, to access the opportunities of the knowledge societies that contributes to equality, solidarity, tolerance, shared responsibilities, and to peace. Respect for nature ensures a balance between meeting current and future needs. But now, what is social media or a social networking service? Well, it's an electronic service, usually web-based, designed to allow users to establish personal or organizational profiles and contact other individuals for the purpose of communicating, collaborating, and/or sharing content with them. And then we have social networking. So this is the creation and maintenance of personal and business relationships, especially online. But now let's take a look at the 5 major differences between social media and social networking. Well, it's the communication style, the goals, the content, the time and effort, and the ROI measurement. And social media consists of the information infrastructure and tools used to produce and distribute content that has individual value but also reflects shared values. It also consists of content that takes the digital form of personal messages, news, and ideas that become the cultural products. It also consists of the people, organizations, and industries that produce and consume both the tools and the content. So the infrastructure, design, and quality of the technologies isn't all that new. And we have a new category of effective news. And this is peculiar kinds of content that circulate most easily over social media during political crisis. Some gossip, some facts, and lots of opinion. And it can often be a form of fake news, and is brought on by digital technologies. And this effective news is characterized by decentralization and non-proprietary strategies, non-market mechanisms, and more effective large-scale non-hierarchical cooperation. And here, citizens are empowered to participate actively. But now let's talk a bit about journalism. So journalists' professional routines need to be underpinned by a strong informational, ethical outlook that's reliant on reverence for human dignity, commitment to truth-telling, and adherence to non-violence, so doing no harm in various practice. Now we move on to theme 8 with information marketing. So marketing is the management process responsible for identifying, anticipating, and satisfying customer requirements profitably. So the goals of marketing is to attract new customers by promising superior value, and to keep and grow the current customer base by delivering satisfaction. But now let's take a look at a simple marketing system. So in a diagram, we have the industry, and this is a collection of sellers, and they send communication, so adverts and direct mail, as well as goods and services to a market, and this is a collection of buyers. And then the market sends information, attitudes, and sales information, as well as money to the industry. So information forms part of the outer loop that supports marketing, and then information as part of the inner loop would be selling information goods, products, and services. So a simple marketing system comprises of different actors and factors like producers or sellers, a product or service, something valuable to exchange in return for the product or service, so money, consumers or customers, and a communication process to have two-way communication, like to provide information about the product or service to the customer or consumer, and to have feedback in the same regard from the customer. But now let's take a look at the basic activities in a marketing system. Well, first, sellers must search for buyers, identify their needs, design good products and services, set prices for them, and store and deliver them. And then the second activity is all elements necessary to bring buyers and sellers together, like product development, research, communication, distribution, pricing, and service. And then the third is each of the major actors in a marketing system adds value for the next level of the system. So information professionals will need to recognize that developing effective marketing strategies is more difficult today, not because of the digital revolution, but because of a society in which customers are becoming more sophisticated and knowledgeable. So in the information marketplace, responses to the concept of marketing falls into two groups. One is that marketing is concerned with encouraging people to buy things that they don't really need or want, and interfering with people's behaviors, attitudes, and values. The other is that marketing is designed to bring you the products you want, when you want them, where you want them, at prices you can afford, and with the information necessary to make informed and satisfying customer choices. But now let's take a look at the company approaches to marketing. So first we have the production concept. Here, companies assume that consumers prefer existing and widely available products that are inexpensive. Managers aim at achieving high production efficiency, low costs, and mass distribution with this concept. It's used when a company wants to expand the market. And then we move on to the product concept. Here, companies assume that consumers prefer quality, performance, and innovative products, but there's little customer input. There's an overemphasis on the product on the assumption that the customer can recognize quality. This brings the danger of marketing myopia, so tunnel vision. For example, Coke not anticipating Starbucks, etc. And then we move on to the selling concept. Here, consumers are looking for aggressive sales and promotions from companies. The aim is to sell what the company makes rather than what the market wants. And then we move on to the marketing concept. This focuses on the need of the buyer instead of the seller. It's an outside to inside approach instead of an inside to outside one. And there are 4 pillars to this approach: target markets, customer needs, integrated marketing, and profitability. And then we move on to the customer concept. This involves high customer loyalty and customer lifetime value, in which marketing revolves primarily around the needs and characteristics of the customer. And this is made possible through technological advances that allow tailor-made or factory customization of products, and through advances in computers and software. And here the company needs and gathers a great deal of individual customer information. And then we move on to the societal marketing concept. So here the focus is on general issues such as the environment and other long-term interests of consumers and society. Products and services are delivered in a way that also preserves or enhances the well-being of consumers and society. The challenge is to balance company profits, consumers' wants, and the public interest. And the company identifies itself with a social or charitable cause. But now let's take a look at the marketing mix. So this is a set of tools used by an information company to pursue marketing objectives in the target market. The price, sales force, and advertising costs can be changed quickly, but the development of new products and altering distribution channels can only be changed in the long run. So now what are the 4 P's of marketing? Well, it's the product, the price, the place or distribution, and promotion. So there are variables that marketing managers can control in order to best satisfy customers in the target market. So in terms of product, you look at if there's demand for the product or service. Does the product appeal to the consumer? And you also take a look at the packaging. Then we move on to promotion, making customers aware of the product. This includes advertising, coupons, rebates, sales, free giveaways, and publicity. Then we talk about the place. So distribution is getting the right product to the right place at the right time, at the right amount, and in the right condition. This also includes storage, warehousing, and transporting. And then we move on to the price, how much customers are willing to pay. You check if the price is competitive with other products, and you see if the company can make a profit.